which I start with the blessing of studying Torah, but I haven't been doing that. I'd like to start that tradition now to say the blessing for studying Torah. So if you know it, say it with me. And if you don't, you'll get to know it. And it's Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah, to be engaged in the study of Torah. Yes. And the Talmud actually says, if you meet a person and you have a conversation and you don't talk about a little bit of Torah, it's a wasted conversation.
I agree with you.
Always about Torah. So this week is it's pretty interesting. I don't know if you saw Cantor Gurney Shabbat message yet, but it's about Korach, who rebelled against Moses. He led a rebellion. It wasn't on January 6th, but it was pretty similar. And before I begin, I'd like to ask any of you, do you know anything about Korach? And if you do, what do you know that you would like to share with me? Does anybody know about anything about Korach? Yes, Cindy.
Questioned God and Moses' authority, and eventually was killed. And there was a big plague and lots of people died because of his rebellion.
Okay, so yes. And Donna, did you want to say something?
No, I'm listening, dear.
Which Donna?
Donna.
This Donna?
Donna Shapiro, not Donna, Donna. Donna.
Yeah, I think Cindy pretty much said it, but it's Korach is leading a group of people who are sort of disgruntled because they now know they're going to be stuck in the wilderness for 40 years and they're not too thrilled with the leadership. And so basically Korach says to Moses and Aaron, like, who are you? Why are you so special? God talks to all of us. So basically he wants to be in charge. And then in response, God swallows him up in the earth.
Okay. Miriam.
I didn't want to wet Cindy. She's a very knowledgeable woman. I did want to tell Cindy that there was no plague involved. As Donna said, God punished him and all his 250 down.
Right. We're going to read about that.
And so that's a little controversial.
So Miriam, your sound is really difficult. It's hard to hear you. I don't know what's going on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, but it's a very interesting Parshat because it shows how God dealt with a rebellion by opening up the earth.
Right. Okay, well, we can talk about what do we think of that in a minute. Lorraine. Hi, Lorraine.
Hello.
Hi, my mitzvah students, just so you know. Go ahead.
It's so good to see you.
I'm here.
And everybody else here too. In addition to what Cindy and Donna so vividly, right? Donna described as well. I had a question about Korah. Wasn't he a relative of Moses as well?
Yes, he was.
To add insult to injury.
We're going to look at the text in a minute. So just so you know, we're going to look at the text in 1 second. The word Korach, actually, there's two other Hebrew words that come from the same root, which are interesting. There's kerach, which means ice. So it suggests he was cold, and heartless in some respect. And kareach, which means a bald spot. And like they say, he created a bald spot of faith or adherence or whatever among the community. So it's all on the name Korach. So, but he was not just some, rabble rouser. He had a lot of prestige of his own. So I want to start with the text, and then I have some interesting commentary about him. So I'll start with this. Where is everybody else? What happened to you? Oh my, hello, are you still there? Yeah, okay. Is everybody there? Okay, so can you all see this? Mm-hmm. All right, I'm going to try to can't see everyone. So let me do this and then pull this down so I can see people. Great. Okay. So it starts with, so Lorraine, why don't you read? Is this big enough for you? Do I need to make it bigger or do I need to make more space? Can you read?
This works
Can
for
you make
me.
it a little bit better?
A little what?
Just a little tiny bit bigger.
Yes.
There you go. Thank you.
Hold on. You can always make it bigger. Okay, and I can do
Perfect.
this as well. Why not? Hold on.
Wow.
I can make-
When you're 70 years young, it gets a little small after a while.
All right, I can do this as well.
Thank-
Okay, now it's better. Okay, so why don't you start, Lorraine?
Sure. Rebellion against Moses and Aaron. Now Korach, the son of Isaac, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, with Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and On, the son of Peleth, sons of Reuben, rose up against Moses together, 250 Israelites, chieftains of their community, chosen in the assembly, men of repute.
Okay, so let's just look at this. So who was Korach? Which tribe did he descend from?
Reuben.
No.
No,
Levi.
Levi.
But it says sons of Reuben.
Reuben.
Levi.
The other two are from Levi. So where was Moses and Aaron from?
Levi.
Levi.
Oh.
They were cousins. The difference is that the descendants of Aaron were now Kohanim, or the high priests. Aaron, among the Levites, Moses and Aaron were Levites as well, but among the Levites, Aaron and his sons and their descendants were now going to be the Kohanim, the high priests. And the other two, Datan and Abiram, were the sons of Reuben.
Got it.
Does anybody know what significance it is to be the son of Reuben? Who was Reuben?
He was the firstborn of Jacob.
He was the firstborn. So they felt, why didn't we have any prestige? We are descended from the firstborn. And as we know from, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that the firstborn usually gets the birthright, is usually the leader, inherits the mantleship of leadership. So this is one guy who's like very well known in the Levite tribe. Already they're elite, the Levites. The Levites, did not receive any land. They do not receive land in the land of Canaan, but they have towns and they live around the temple, and they are supported by the rest of the country because of their job. And here are the Reubenites saying, well, what about us? We're descended from the oldest and we don't have any prestige. And we say, with 250 others, chieftains of the community, chosen and elected chieftains, men of repute. So these are not just, rabble, like people coming, just the normal people, but leaders all rose up against Moses. And what did they say? So continue, Lorraine.
They combined against Moses and Aaron and said to them, you take too much upon yourselves, for all the congregation is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Why then do you raise yourselves above the congregation of Hashem?
Okay, so what do you think about this accusation? Is it reasonable? On the face of it, how does it strike you what they're saying? Brad.
Well, isn't this exactly what Moses's father-in-law told him when he said to delegate? He said, you're taking too much upon yourself and you need to delegate.
Okay, I agree with you, but do you think that saying chieftains of the community chosen in the assembly, men of repute, implies that some power was delegated to these people who came up?
No, I'm not clear about that, but this is exactly what Moses's father-in-law said to him. You take too much upon yourself and you need to delegate to other people. And apparently he didn't.
Do you feel that's what he's saying, that when he says you take too much upon yourself, do you think that's what he's talking about? Because the delegation was for judgment and justice.
Right.
People were standing in
exactly.
line for days trying to get disputes resolved by Moses. And he said, you need to spread out that. Do you think that's what they're talking about here?
It's
unclear.
It's unclear.
Okay, Donna?
But there was clearly a delegation. Moses had a delegation issue.
Okay.
That may be, but I think maybe the interpretation of you take too much upon yourselves is not, we're interpreting it more from an English standpoint. It may be he's saying you're making too much of yourself. You're like saying, I'm really important.
And why do you, and what about the next phrase? Doesn't that sort of...
And that kind of, I think, backs up my argument, because it's saying, hey, everybody's holy. What makes you so special?
Okay, so he's saying,
why do you raise yourself above the congregation of the Lord? He's ignoring the fact that it's actually God that raised him up.
Okay, so he's saying you think you're holier. I think
Right.
You think you're holier than us, because all the congregation is holy, every one of them, and God is among all of us. Why then do you raise yourselves above the congregation? You think you're holier. You, Moses and Aaron, you're the high priest. You're the one doing, you and your sons do the sacrificing. We don't, we just bring it to you. And Moses, you're constantly above us. Now, you think...
Sounds jealous to me.
Okay. Based on everything we know about, for sure, Moses, what he's been doing with them for the last like 3 or 4 years, because now the 40 years are just starting. Do you think Moses is holier? Actually?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I do.
None of the others have communed with God. Is this where this expression "holier than thou" has come
I
from?
don't know, maybe.
I mean, that just struck me. And then they said, God is among us, but they haven't been communing with God like Moses has. So he is holier than.
Also, don't forget that Moses went up to Mount Sinai and the rest of the elders said, no, we're staying down here. You go. They didn't want to go. No. You go up there. We'll wait for you. And a lot of them then created the golden calf. So Donna mentioned something, which I think we should just reiterate. This happened in the context of what? What had just happened in the last week's Parsha? Donna, you want to read?
Basically, they were informed that they were going to be wandering for 40 years in the desert, and the entire generation that came out of Egypt, was born in Egypt, will die out before they go.
Right.
The promised land.
Because they all said, we should go back to Egypt, and how could you take us?
It was so wonderful. We missed the leeks and the garlic.
Yeah. So, they were part of that. Apparently as well. They're very unhappy. They're stuck here, and it's like, and this guy's going to be leading us now for the next 40 years. I'm going to die under him. So there's that as well. And wait, something else just struck me about it. I don't know. It'll come back to me. I had a thought. I just want you to know. Sorry. There's 2 people who want to come into the room. I just want you to know that, and this is it's in the Torah, but most people don't remember this. After Moses came down from Sinai, they remember where they say he's like light it's misinterpreted by Michelangelo. They say he has horns, but it's really like rays of light coming out. And his face also is like glowing or in some way full of light, to the point where Moses wore a mask most of the time, some kind of a covering. I sort of think of it like, our COVID mask, covering this, or I don't know, maybe he wore a veil and they really couldn't see him, but he only took it off when he was, when God spoke to him, and then when he communicated to the people, and then he walked around with this veil or covered up. So he became very remote. And of course, the Midrash says he rejected his wife. He abstained from sex. He, was he was kind of a lonely, holy guy, and very separate. So people must have not felt that close to him anymore. I imagine, because he was removed from the people. And why do you raise yourself? Well, he had this light and whatever. But it still seems like their question on the surface is reasonable. Why are you going to be the leader? I'm also very elite and smart. And they talk about Korach being in the Midrash. What did they say? I don't even know how this could be in the desert, but the Midrash says that he was so rich that it took like 10 donkeys or something to carry just the keys to his strong boxes and possessions.
Oh my word.
Just to carry the keys. So he was, I don't know how they took all of that out of Egypt. You know what I mean? It doesn't seem reasonable, but we're not talking about that. We're just talking about an idea. And so then what was Moses's response? How did he respond? So who would like to read?
May I?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, dear. Then Moses heard this. When Moses heard this, because there's a little typo on my thing. When Moses heard this, he fell on his face, and he spoke to Korah and all his company, saying, tomorrow morning the Lord will show who is his and who is holy, and will cause him to come near to him. The one whom he chooses, he will cause to come near to him. Do this, take fire.
Let's stop for a minute.
Okay.
So I think this is interesting, and the commentaries talk about it. How did Moses respond? How did he respond?
He fell on his face.
But did he argue with them?
No, he was humble.
Yeah.
He was humble.
Anybody else? Did he argue? Did he? I think it's interesting that he just threw it to God. And
he said, I'll prove it. I'll prove it to you.
I'll prove it to you, but there's no warning to God, so to speak. There's just this thing. All right, God's going to show you. And it's kind of like he's depending on God to prove it. And I don't know if he's exhausted. Oh my God, I just can't do this. God, you have to take over here. I just can't. God, show them, because there's an interesting relationship between Moses and God. He doesn't argue. He doesn't reason. He doesn't anything. He says, okay, God will show you who's holy and who is close to him. And the one whom he chooses he will cause to come near him. So let's just see. Okay, so then do this. This is, Moses comes up with this without, usually it's God says to Moses, tell the people this or do this. This is totally Moses's idea out of the blue. So who wants to read now? Somebody else.
I have a question too.
Yes.
Responding to what you asked initially, he fell on his face. Aren't there other instances in the Bible too? It's an act of submission and humility first, and then submission, and then acquiescence. Because, and even prayer, isn't that high holy days when the high priest fell on his face? So it's I think it's a very bold and visual gesture of submission.
Right. And it's not to Korach, it's to God's presence or whatever. And, it's like, though I honestly sometimes see that and I go, he's like so shocked and so exhausted. He just falls. It's like he falls over.
He collapsed.
Yeah. But really, I think you're right. He goes down and it's like, okay, God, you have to take over. But he falls on his face. Is it usually happening when there's something distressing? It seems to be. They fall on their face. Yeah, Brad. This one's like Brad and then Lorraine. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm interested in this business of who is holy. This comes shortly after the Holiness Code, where we've been told all of the actions that make one holy. And here we're down to whether an individual is holy or not. And I'm trying to understand the relationship between the holiness code that we've just gone through Parsha after Parsha about, and this concept of an individual being holy.
Well, in the holiness code.
Or not holy.
Okay.
Either you are or you're not.
before I answer, and then Lorraine, were you gonna, Lorraine, did you have something to say on this?
Yeah.
topic? Go ahead.
Oh, you can finish with addressing what you were going to say with two.
I'm wondering, Brad, in the holiness code, you have to behave in a certain way to be holy. You're not inherently holy just because you exist. It says you must act in a certain way to be holy. And I'm thinking that Moses is saying, okay, you say you're holy, and this is how you're behaving. And we're still not exactly clear what Korach's agenda is, but Moses is very clear, as we're going to see in a minute. And is this an act of holiness according to the holiness code? So perhaps that's what he's talking about. You say you're holy and yet you're leading this rebellion and causing all this uprising, and you have a different agenda. And we'll see what Moses thinks the agenda is. So you're not even adhering to the holiness code, perhaps, is what he's saying. Well, we're going to find out. 1 second, first Lorraine, and then who is it? Merle, you had your hand up, but first Lorraine, go ahead.
Yeah, the first thing is, I think that maybe before I have read that Moses has also fell on his face before, or out of frustration in the past. So it just seems like it's a MO, right? Like a reaction that is similar when this, oh, here I am, these people giving me trouble again.
Yeah, I
think along those lines.
But then
I wanted to ask something at the beginning when Korah questions Moses' authority. And I understand that he may have done it in a wrong way, but aren't we supposed to also question, like, if we don't agree with something that the Torah is outlining? And isn't that part of the thing of wrestling with it? Like, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a very good question. And there's a lot of commentary, and the rabbis and Talmud says there's two kinds of questioning. One is questioning for the sake of shamayim, which means for the sake of heaven. And this is a question to find out the truth. The question is, and then there's another questioning that's for power and control. And so what is Korach's agenda? To find out the truth or to assert power and control? When you have a question, do you show up with 250 armed men to ask your question? So there's something there that's a little more than, Moses, I want to talk to you about this. It's like all of us against the two of you. What do you have to say about that? And again, I go back to they're not violent, but it's menacing. It's threat. It's threatening. If 250 people came out in front of your house and lined up and started saying, we want to know it's scary. So I don't think it's not questioned for the sake of heaven. But it seems to be a question for the sake of power. And there's a very distinct difference according to the Talmud and a lot of commentaries. So, Donna, you had a question.
Yeah, I had about holiness, and when it comes to saving lives and risking your own life and then you had, like, in Nazi Germany, the girls had to entertain.
Is that relevant?
It's about holiness.
Yeah.
Do you think that when someone's willing to risk their life, they don't want to compromise their holiness or their chastity or their virtue, and want to fall in love and get married, but then they're taken advantage of? Does God consider them unclean or unholy? No, I don't think so.
I'm not, we could talk about this off because I don't think this is connected to
Okay, I just want to know.
Okay, but whatever you have to do to save your life, you're allowed to break any law except kill somebody else. Or
I want to keep somebody from hurting someone at the temple, or a threat to the temple.
Okay, this is not relevant.
I'm okay.
It's not relevant. Okay.
Okay.
So,
thank you, dear.
this is what it says. Okay, so any more comments? Did somebody else want to?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think Korach just expects power because where he came from. And I don't think he even has a fathom of an idea of what it is to be holy. He thinks his holiness is coming from because who he is and where he was born into. And I think Moses's question is, what did you do to make you so holy? And I also think that, like I said just now, it's a threat when you show up with that many people behind you or with you, and however they were armed, which could have been absolutely anything in those days, that, yeah, he's threatening Moses for questioning him.
Okay, so what's his solution? Oh, Donna?
I just think what's interesting is that you were talking about what it sounds like on the surface, what Korach is saying. It's very seductive because it sounds like, hey, we're all equal. Isn't that what God intends? But that's not really what he cares about. He cares about himself getting elevated.
Right, which we're going to see in a minute. We're
Sound
going to
like Donald Trump to me.
Well, interesting that you say that. So first, he has this magical solution, which is, and who wants to just read what he suggests? Someone who hasn't read says, do this.
Here, I will.
Okay.
Where am I starting?
Right here, do this.
Oh, I see it. Do this, take fire pans, Korah and all your company, put fire in them and put incense in them before the Lord tomorrow. And it shall be that the man whom the Lord chooses is the Holy One. You take too much upon yourselves, you sons of Levi.
Okay. It's a weird solution. It's a
I
magic.
don't see where it's a solution.
Well, he's saying, you take fire pans, which is like metal pans that you put coal or whatever, and you put incense in a little wood or whatever, and it burns, or you put them down. And then the idea is that God will put fire in the one of that he chooses, which is, again, putting this very weird onus / request on God. I mean,
yeah.
And there's criticism about Moses in some of this, certainly later when all the people die, that, he's stuck there too for 40 years, don't forget.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's pretty frustrated too. I mean, we forget that, the character of Moses is human and vulnerable and has a speech defect and is separated from his wife and has this burden all the time of these complaining people. And he's just like, okay, you know what? God's going to show you. I'm not even going to argue with you. But then he says something that makes us think that there's more implied, like the Torah doesn't say it, but Moses knows it or hears it or whatever. The text says that. So, okay. So who would like to read this on verse 8? Because here really is Moses calling out Korach of what he really wants. So who would like to read that? Okay, Mara. But unmute. Okay, go ahead.
I'm trying. Could I just say one thing? Because for some reason I put the hand up and it keeps going right down.
I'm sorry. Yeah, sure.
So you couldn't have seen it. But it seems to me that the way Moses is described as handling when Korah comes to him is a message that when opposition comes along, that we need to, as they say, put some time between the match and the flame, that we need to think, what would God want me to do, as opposed to just responding.
I think you're right.
I think you're right. Definitely right.
I think you're absolutely right. He has a very instant response. And yet, I think, when you think right before, they all were screaming at him about going back to Egypt. And now God said, all right, that's it. God wanted to destroy them and start over. And Moses is always intervening for these people. And they're always unhappy. They're really, and I wrote about this, vaguely, a few times. I've written about Korach. Last year, I looked at my Shabbat messages about Korach, and I said, it seems like everybody's having a nervous breakdown. Everybody's freaking out. Korach, the people, Moses, they're all, just falling apart. None of them are acting, they're all acting emotionally. Moses' reaction is very, striking out and whatever, and they're all reacting, and it's getting to them, and they're sort of falling apart, the whole community right now. And it's hard, it's to be wandering for like 2 years now, and all this stuff that's been going on, and they're just not handling it well at all. So here's what Moses says. Do you want to read, Mara?
Sure. Then Moses said to Korah, "Hear now, you sons of Levi. Is it a small thing to you that the God of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel to bring you near to himself, to do the work of the tabernacle of the Lord, and to stand before the congregation to serve them, and that he has brought you near to himself, you and all your brethren, the sons of Levi, with you?"
Okay, so what's he saying? What's he saying? Who knows? What's he saying?
He's saying, look you got it good, and you have a position of stature. Wasn't that enough? You were there serving the people in an honored position.
I mean, you're Levites. You're higher. And we have the 3 matzahs at Pesach. It's one for the Kohanim, one for the Levites, and one for the Israelites, which is the rest of us. So, I mean, you have status. You are honored. You're one of the Levites. You're going to be in the sanctuary. You're going to be supported by all the people. Your work is so holy and sacred that everybody else has to give you a tenth of whatever of their belongings. You're going to have this amazing life. And already you're working in the tabernacle, in the Mishkan. So is that nothing to you? And then what is the next thing he says, Mara?
"And are you seeking the priesthood also? Therefore you and all your company are gathered together against the Lord. And what is Aaron that you complain against him?"
So what does Moses understand Korach's real agenda is? What does he really want?
He wants to be ahead of everything.
He wants to be the high priest. He wants to be
Yeah.
the Kohen Hagadol. He wants to replace Aaron, who's the Kohen Hagadol, the great. And now you really want to run the show. You're seeking the priesthood now also. You want to be the Kohanim. So he sees this as a fight for power. It's not he's saying, share the holiness or whatever, but he's saying you want to replace Aaron and you want to be in charge. So
Jealousy.
Even though, which is interesting, I don't know if we'll have time. Wait, what time is it? Let me see. I found a really interesting article by Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, who I highly recommend going on his website. He's so insightful about writing about every single parsha. He passed away. He was the chief rabbi of England. And he talks about how Korach is a populist, which I hope I'll be able to show you. And populism, which we have now, is like you speak like you represent the people. He's saying, aren't we all holy? But he's really not talking about any of those other 255 men. It's an excuse for him to be a leader of rebellion and for him to replace the leaders. So he says, oh, it's unfair. We're all, we have no rights. We, but it's really about me, that I want to be in charge now. And so Rabbi talks about it really beautifully. And so hopefully we'll get to look at that. And then Moses sent to call Dathan and Avraham, the sons of Eliab, and said, you come up here too. And they said, we will not come up. We're not joining you. And what do they say? This is unbelievable. Brad, I think you should read this because it's really interesting. Right here. But you have to unmute.
Oh, wow. Nothing but complaining.
It is.
Is
it a small thing that you have brought us out of a land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the wilderness, that you should keep acting like a prince over us?
Okay. This is what Rabbi Sachs even calls fake news. What land, what are they referring to when they say a land flowing with milk and honey?
Egypt.
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 Yeah, there's
Yeah.
you took us out of this great land of milk. I mean, it's a
And
complete
leaks.
lie. They're
Yeah.
called slaves.
Slavery and, oh my God.
You have taken us out of a land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the wilderness, and you keep acting like a prince. They are completely twisting reality, which is
Yes.
unbelievable. Okay, go ahead. Continue, Brad.
Moreover, you have not brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey, nor given us inheritance of fields and vineyards. Will you put out the eyes of these men? We will not come up.
So they think, you're going to kill us now. So they're turning Moses into a tyrant, into, and a liar, and they're completely distorting reality. That's unbelievable.
Oh,
For the
sounds
sake
like somebody-
of trying to overthrow him. And we see this in politics today. I don't know if you, oh my God. I don't know how many of you just read yesterday that Clarence Thomas said that, what did he say? The vaccines were
The vaccine, something about
the vaccines are made from the aborted babies.
right.
Oh my God.
Vaccines are made from the material.
Conspiracy theory, crazy
This
shit.
is a justice of the Supreme Court.
Oh my God.
So, I mean, the twisting of reality, and for what? Certainly not for the sake of heaven, Lorraine, not to find the truth,
No.
but to overthrow the society as it is, which, Brad, I could argue with you, maybe he did delegate and everybody did have it, but they didn't even want that. They wanted to run things, and certainly Korach wanted to be, run all of the holy aspects of the high priest and gain all of that prestige. So that is like where they are. And then we say, then Moses was very angry, finally. And he says to the Lord, to God, do not respect their offering. I have not taken one donkey from them, nor have I hurt one of them. So what does this imply he's also been accused of from that comment?
Gleaning from the congregation.
But also, I have not taken
Stealing.
What?
Stealing.
Stealing,
Freeloading.
freeloading, or taxing them, forcing them to give him something. He said he has it. And this guy says, oh, you're going to put out our eyes? We're not coming up. He says, what are you talking about? Where's this coming from? I have not taken anything from them. I have not hurt anyone. It's been God. He's done a lot of hurting, but he hasn't done anything. And he's just like the lies, the twisting, the frustration of what these people have brought to Moses. And that's why Korach is so dangerous. He's probably, he was charming, he was wealthy, maybe he was good looking, and he was smooth talking, and he was propagating all of this fake news and all of these lies. Moses, he's Lord hear for us.
Rabbi, it reminds me of the artifact that the King of Saudi Arabia gave to Donald Trump, and it's supposed to go in the Smithsonian Institute. It's in Mar-a-Lago.
Okay, right, okay. So, and Moses said to Korach, okay, so who wants to go now? Let's see. Okay, Jan.
Moses said to Korach, tomorrow you and all your company be present before the Lord, you and they, as well as Aaron. Let each take his fire pan and put incense in it, and each of you bring his fire pan before the Lord, 250 fire pans, both you and Aaron, each with his fire pan.
I want to stop for a second. So Moses is not putting a fire pan, but you and Aaron. So again, this sort of implies this thing that Aaron is the high priest and you think you should be the high priest, because it's really a competition between you and Aaron. It's not like Moses is putting his fire pan in there. It's you and Aaron, because this is what you think you're holier, or you should be the chosen one. Continue.
So every man took his fire pan, put fire in it, laid incense on it, and stood at the door of the tabernacle of meeting with Moses and Aaron. And Korach gathered all the congregation against them at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. Then the presence of the Lord appeared to all the congregation.
So do we know what the tabernacle of meeting is? Do you understand? Everybody understand what that is? Or are you confused what that is? The word in Hebrew, I don't know why they call it a tabernacle. I don't even know what that word means. A mishkan is like a dwelling place. It's basically like a traveling temple. It's a big tent with they have a little fence around it, and the altar is there, and the fire and whatever. It's and obviously it's beautiful, and they made it, and they have beautiful artifacts and skins and whatever with it, but it's traveling. Think of like a circus. You can put it down and carry it and then set it up again. So that was
very portable.
A portable temple,
Like the Ark of the Covenant?
The Ark of the Covenant was in the center of it. Yes, the Ark was in there. And so at the 10 Commandments and whatever, so they were carrying it as they moved. It came with them, and then they would set up camp for however many days or whatever. And that would be the first thing they would set up. So when they say they were coming to the door, it wasn't literally a door. It was kind of a flap, or it was a gate or whatever. But at the opening of the big tent and surrounding it was an enclosed space, open space,
a holy place
around it that you could see over what was there. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, separate yourselves from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment. Oh my God. So God says, stand away. I'm going to consume.
Rain fire down.
Yes. So
it's like in Indiana Jones, the Ark of the Covenant, but they happened Nazis for messing with us.
Okay, but let's not comment on that, because I want to read this part. Somebody else entered. Okay. Then again, 22. I want somebody to read just 22, because it's a very interesting response. Susan Ehrlich, you want to read?
Sure, but I want to make one comment with that. It struck me in the beginning too, with the fire pan, and when there was a disaster, and when did that happen? Before with Nadav and Abihu, when they had alien fire and they were struck down with fire. So maybe Moses was hoping that God would do something. He had a similar design, and Moses did, for the fire pan business, that maybe God would react catastrophically, which he did, but not necessarily the same way.
Okay, but read this sentence now.
Okay, then they fell on their faces. They did too, and said,
no, this is Moses and Aaron.
Oh, okay, good. So they fell and good, thank you. Oh God, the God of the spirits of all flesh, shall one man sin and you be angry with all of the congregation?
Okay, so what does this remind you of? Who else argued with God not to kill
Abraham.
Abraham.
For Sodom and Gomorrah, right?
Right.
So so what do we think of Moses' response? I mean, based on everything that happened before, well, how does that make you view Moses?
He's protecting the innocent.
Yes, even in his anger or whatever, he still thinks he's not going to let God destroy everyone. And he's always, I mean, I love the writers. I mean, I personally do not believe this was, came from Sinai or whatever. I think there were different writers who, some of the stuff is really incredibly inspired and brilliant, and some of the stuff is very anthropomorphic and of its time. And Moses is constantly holding God back. He's constantly like reining God in from God's bloodthirsty desires to let me kill them all. Let me get rid of them and we'll start over. I mean, he already did it. Before Moses, he did the flood. Think about it. We think about the evolution of God. And it's really like humans who have shaped God in the Torah. Because when God was on his own, or God on God's own, I don't want to say, his, God destroyed the world except for Moses, in the story of the flood. I'm fed up with them. They're gotta go. Now, and when I'm fed up with Sodom and Gomorrah, they got to go. Abraham said, God, you can't destroy it for the sake of what if there are even 10 righteous men?
They haggle for the city.
Okay, right. Now, Moses multiple times has had to rein God back from destroying the people. This is like, applying to God's conscience. Are you going to like kill everyone for one man's sin? But earlier, what was his other reasoning for, if anybody recall, for not wiping out the people? Does anybody remember another logic that Moses used?
Yes, so your reputation will be sullied from that.
They'll say you took them out of Egypt to kill them in the desert. And your reputation will be terrible, so you can't do it. And that also appeals to God. It's a very interesting view of God. And then when you go to the prophets, their concept of God is completely different. And it becomes more elevated, more about justice, mercy, kindness, whatever. It just keeps evolving. We still are evolving our idea of God. And Deepak Chopra actually said, and I know he's not Jewish, but very spiritual, the higher your consciousness is as a human, the higher your understanding of God is. It's not just this father or whatever. That's very primitive. The higher you understand, the more you realize it's so much greater than that. And that's not really the point. So that was his thing. So he said, are you going to be angry and you're going to kill them all? And so Lord said, speak to the congregation saying, get away from the tents of Korach, Datan, and Aviram. Get away from them. Move away. I'm warning you now. So who wants to read 25? This is like the part of the story, the gory part and whatever. Who hasn't read? Who would like to read? Okay, Stacy.
Okay. Then Moses rose and went to Dathan and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. And he spoke to the congregation, saying, depart now from the tents of these wicked men. Touch nothing of theirs, lest you be consumed in all their sins. So they got away from around the tents of Korach, Dathan, and Abiram. Yeah, and Dathan and Abiram, I don't have a problem with that. Came out and stood at the doors of their tents with their wives, their sons, and their little children.
And Moses said, by this you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works, for I have not done them of my own will. If these men die naturally like all men, or if they are visited by a common fate of all men, then the Lord has not sent me. This is really like trial by real ordeal in a way.
Trial by fire.
Yeah. But if the Lord creates a new thing and the earth opens up its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they shall go down alive into the pit, that you will understand that these men have rejected the Lord. Oy, oy, oy.
Wow, it's so hard to be around people who don't even believe in God.
Okay.
I was okay with them.
Okay, let's just do this. And actually, the people are very upset. They think Moses was so cruel to do this. Wait, hold on. I just want to make this.
They don't know who to believe. They're just all this stuff is being shoved at them. And
okay.
But as the story evolves, there's no mention here of holiness.
None.
It no longer becomes a question of holiness.
No, you're right. And Moses is criticized for this, for this asking God to do this. And it's quite harsh. And you're right. Holiness, who's holy? Nobody.
Hallelujah. Thank God for that.
Pretty horrible. Okay. So and when he finished speaking these words, so who hasn't read yet? Who would like to read? How about Miriam? Do you want to read? But you have to unmute.
I haven't read yet. Now it came to pass, as he finished speaking all these words, that the ground split apart under them, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with their household, and all the men with Korach, all their gifts. So they and all those with them went down alive into the pit. The earth closed over them, and they perished. And all Israel who were around them,
Hard to hear you. Yeah.
their cry, for they said, lest the earth swallow us up also.
Okay. Okay. Very hard, Miriam. You have like something interfering. It's very hard. So I'm going to stop you there. And a fire came out from the Lord and consumed the 250 men who were offering incense. Oh. Okay. And then this is really bizarre. And then we're going to talk. Then the Lord spoke to Moses saying, tell Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, to pick up the fire pans out of the blaze, for they are holy. Brad. They are holy.
Oh my God.
Set the fire some distance away. The fire pans of them, these men who sinned against their own souls, let them be made into hammered plates as a covering for the altar, because they presented them before the Lord. Therefore, they are holy, and they shall be assigned to the children of Israel. So Eleazar the priest took the bronze fire pans, which those who were burned up had presented, and they were hammered out as a covering on the altar to be a memorial to the children of Israel, that no outsider who is not a descendant of Aaron should come near to offer incense before the Lord, and that he might not become like Korach and his companions, just as the Lord had said to him through Moses. Oh my God.
Wow.
Right. The pit, the description before sounds like a giant pothole. You know, it just everything opens up and you just fall into it.
It's pretty awful. It's pretty awful.
Horrifying.
It's horrifying. And their children, their wives, what did they do?
Exactly.
You know, it's really brutal. Brutal and cruel and disturbing. And I don't even know. I can't even defend it. I think, you know, but you can see what
Glad
happens
to hear that.
when people become, just live on their emotions, live on revenge, live on anger. There's no logic. There's no rationality. There's no thought. And also it's like Korach and his family and followers, they were dehumanized because they rebelled. And yes, their rebellion was frightening. Now, I do want to talk about January 6th and those people who rebelled, and we don't know if they were going to string up Aaron and Moses, but they were going to kill senators. They were really frightening. And it's kind of a similar, in the name of democracy, in the name of freedom. They were doing that just like these people. Is there what do you think should have happened to them? I mean, I don't think any of us are that, unless you think this was a just response or punishment. What else could have happened? Could anything else have happened? Should anything else have happened?
I want to say, I think God was trying to teach the children of Israel that he has set boundaries and ordinances in place, and to protect us, and that we must listen to his commandments and obey them.
Okay.
And the jealousy is like treachery. It's terrible.
Okay, so then you think God, and I want to hear from other people, you think that was a just response or reasonable response. What about other people? How did you feel about that response? And could there have been some, Brad?
Well, I'm still really struggling with this, the conclusion that it's not Aaron and Moses who are holy. It's not Korach and his people who are holy. It's the fire pans that are holy.
I know, I agree.
What are we to make of this? This is so odd.
It's extremely odd.
But it's really bad. It's a really bad picture of really bad human nature then and now. I mean, I sat with a bunch of 11 and 12-year-olds last night when they were done with their dance competition. And these kids were discussing one individual in their group who does, she's not using fire pans, but she's doing stuff to hurt other kids. And I'm sitting here and I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, okay, this kid is, I lived through this last night with the things that this child wants to do to her teammates because they're ahead of her in their points and stuff. And I'm like, where do I go with this? I'm the only adult sitting in this room with these kids. Who do I talk to? Because this child needs help. And I look at it at the same thing. Korach and his followers, they needed help as far as how they needed to be taught. But people like that don't want to learn.
Okay, Donna.
Okay, I'm going to try and defend the holiness of the fire pans. The fire pans are symbolic of a connection between humans and God. Yes. And it's that connection that is holy, not the individual person who's putting the stuff in the fire pan. So that we have to preserve that connection with God. It's not about people per se.
Yeah, but okay, Brad, you want to?
You don't buy that?
Yeah, sort of. Wait.
wait. Okay, Brad, you want to?
And I think we have to look beyond the literality. Rabbi Leader once said that something like that. I don't want to quote it, but what I got from him was that there are things in the Bible about truth.
No, some things aren't facts, not facts.
Non-facts, yes.
Truth.
And I think
what's the truth here? What truth is it teaching us?
Well, I think one is certainly, as everyone else said, these were people. Yeah, that was, I think, a good comparison with January 6th, except that were first of all jealous and zealous and wanted the power. And in some respects, it was fine with me that they all fell into the pit, because there's another thing in the Talmud about evil and people, people who stand by when evil is committed are part of the problem themselves. And this was one of the instances of divine justice in a way, and why wasn't God there with the Nazis? That's another thing. It would be great if they all fell into the pit, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Wait, Mara.
I'd like to look at it in terms of ritual, that ritual is always important. So the fire pans are always important. They're not enough though, but you cannot pray without ritual. You cannot be holy without that ritual, because it's that ritual that reminds you of all the holiness code, of how to be a holy human being.
Okay. I personally, and 1 second, what came to me, and this is not, this is personal and we're all sort of responding. You put those fire pans on the tabernacle and you know what they were. You're not going to rebel. This is a warning. To me, it looks like a warning. Don't mess with this, or you could be consumed like the people whose fire pans these are. I don't see it as particularly holy, even though that's what they're saying here. I see it as a real warning to be careful of what you're doing, and so it's a little frightening to me, those fire pans on the tabernacle. Every time I look at them, I'm going to be remembering the 200, all those people swallowed up and the people who were consumed, and it doesn't feel holy to me. So that's personally, I have issues with some of the Torah, obviously, and I still, and I'm looking for the truth here, not the fact. The truth to me is that when you you vie or you organize for evil power to overthrow, ultimately you will be swallowed up by your own sins, or your own behavior will swallow you up, not literally in the ground, but you will be swallowed up. You will self-destruct, or you will be destroyed, because if not you, your kids or whatever. I just watched this mini series on Hulu called Under the Banner of Heaven, and it's about Mormons. And this one sect group, a family, really became like radical fundamentalist Mormons, to the point where they were able to justify murdering mainly women who didn't want to participate in polygamy, or who rebelled, and they had all kinds of scripture to quote. And at the very end, they're like trying to kill each other.
That's crazy.
They're literally, it's a fascinating, and it's based on a true story. It's
God.
it's based, so and it was all under the name of God. You know what I mean? And
Fanaticism.
they swallow themselves up. They were swallowed up and destroyed. So maybe that's the truth of this, but otherwise, it's a pretty brutal story.
I know a person that's anti-Semitic and bad.
Raise your hand. Donut. You can't just talk. You can't just talk. You got to raise.
Sorry.
Because,
Sorry,
okay.
Sorry.
So anyone else besides Merle to say anything? Okay, Merle.
I'm just thinking, with all of this, and especially what we're going through between January 6th and now, everyone has their own definition of spirituality, faith, whatever. And I think that the biggest problem now is that I don't know that we'll ever know the truth, because everybody is spewing what they believe is to be the truth upon everyone else. And I think I think we could search the truth forever and read all these books, which many of us do, on different faiths, and know people of different faiths, and how they react to things and how we react back. I think that, again, it's every type of religion, spirituality, whatever you want to call it, has a way of getting back at the person who they don't think is doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And it's harsh.
It's harsh. But what I think ultimately, if we're looking at the message, is that you will bring it upon yourself. You will.
I think you have to.
Hopefully, if you're
right.
I don't know. There are a lot of Nazis who moved to Argentina and lived lives till so it's not necessarily so. But it's a very interesting, controversial Parsha. And we had a great discussion. I really enjoyed studying with you today. And I want to wish you Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Happy 4th of July.
Thank you.
Remember why this country was founded and what the principles were. And I'll see you next time. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Bye, everyone.
Right.
Be safe. God bless you.
Stay cool.
Of course.
Hey, Merle.
Thank you for everything.
You too.
Thank you for all